Welcome to this explainer. You look at the picturesque harbor of Mudeford today, and you'd absolutely never guess the violently hidden past right under the surface. But, well, step into my boots for a minute as an 18th century customs and excise officer patrolling this southern coast, and let me tell you, a very, very different picture emerges. From the outside, it might look like a quiet coastal village now, but beneath the sand and the salt water, there's a dark, bloody history just waiting to be uncovered.
I mean, this is what you're going to see if you visit Mudeford Quay today. It's just this incredibly serene, modern scene. You've got families flocking here for holidays, setting up along the stone walls for a sunny day of crabbing, kids with the little nets, buckets full of bait, stunning views over the water, people queuing up for fish and chips. It's the absolute picture of a peaceful working harbour and a beloved British seaside getaway, right?
But here's the question that kind of changes everything. How on earth did this peaceful family destination become the site of a desperate, bloody naval battle? Because let me tell you, when I was walking this beat back in 1784, these very same sands, they weren't a place for holidaymakers, no way. They were a highly dangerous, terrifying war zone. And for us revenue officers, man, we were completely, hopelessly outgunned.
Now, to really grasp this, you've got to look at the geography. See that narrow entrance into Christchurch Harbour? That's what we call the Run, and it is a treacherous, hazardous stretch of water. Seriously, if you didn't know the local tides and sandbanks perfectly, you'd wreck your ship in an instant. Plus, the only land access to the nearby town of Christchurch was across two easily monitored bridges. So, for a smuggler, this geography was an absolute dream, a perfect, highly defensible stronghold. But for a customs officer like me, just trying to enforce the king's law, it was literally a nightmare.
And just to give you an idea of the sheer terror of what we were up against, we weren't fighting a couple of guys sneaking a barrel of rum ashore in the dead of night. No. In July 1784, a local mastermind named John Streeter organized a massive smuggling operation. The scale was just staggering. He mustered 300 organized men, got 100 wagons ready, and mobilized 400 horses right there on the beach to transport illicit goods. I mean, just try to imagine standing on the shoreline, seeing an illegal army of that size forming right in front of you. The mismatch in force was absolutely terrifying.
So what exactly were they waiting for? Well, Streeter was supervising the unloading of two ships, we call them luggers, that had sailed over from Cherbourg. In the haul, 5,000 casks of illicit spirits. Just let that number sink in for a second. 5,000 casks, along with 400 chests of tea, brazenly dropped right onto Avon Beach, just east of the quay, in broad daylight. The sheer audacity of this free trade network was completely out of control.
Obviously, you can't exactly hide a mobilization of 300 men and 400 horses. A young fellow excise officer of mine, a guy named Noyce, actually saw this massive operation unfolding. He knew the immense danger we were in, right? So he rushed to report the facts to his superior. And you know what happened? Much to his surprise and my absolute sheer frustration, his superior literally told him to just go away. Whether it was out of fear or corruption, our own local leadership completely abandoned us. Young Noyce actually had to ride all the way to the military station in Lymington just to find someone who would listen and send us some backup.
So while we're scrambling for help, the smugglers were getting nice and comfortable in their nerve center. Today, they're called Haven Cottages, but back then, this was the infamous Haven House Inn, sitting right there on the quay. And for us, customs officers, this building was straight-up enemy territory. It was where the smugglers stored their contraband, where they drank, and where they ultimately orchestrated their violent defenses against us.
And the person running that fortress? A formidable woman named Hannah Seller. She was the landlady of the Haven House Inn, and let me tell you, she was deeply, intricately embedded in the illicit free trade network. She wasn't just pouring pints in there. She allowed her pub to be used to store illegal cargo, and she'd actively induce her customers to help out any smuggling vessels that ran into trouble. She was an absolute central pillar in making Mudeford a smuggler's paradise.
So how did this all finally boil over into the Battle of Mudeford? Well, the timeline really shows how fast this trap was set. On July 5th, a revenue cutter called the Rose spots Streeter's vessel and kicks off this tense, days-long cat-and-mouse sea pursuit. Fast forward to July 14th, and Streeter has his massive unloading operation fully set up on Avon Beach. We knew he couldn't take them by land, so a customs vessel sent a longboat to summon help from the Royal Navy. Finally, Thursday, July 15th, around 6 p.m. on this weirdly calm, warm summer evening, 3 government vessels, including the Navy sloop HMS Orestes, converge on the harbor entrance. The trap was set, or so we thought.
Now, you really have to understand the terrifying tactical mismatch we were facing here. When John Streeter saw our naval ships approaching, he didn't run. No, he rode right to the Haven House, forced all the customers out of the pub, and marched them down to the beach to strip the smuggling ships of their rigging so we couldn't sail them away. Then, the smugglers literally dug trenches right into the sand. So picture this. They are firing muskets at us from fortified trenches on the beach and from the solid walls of the Haven House Inn. And where we are advancing in open, rocking rowboats, completely exposed on the water with absolutely zero cover.
The climax of this assault was just a pure tragedy for the revenue service. As our boats neared the shore, William Allen, the master of the Orestes, stood up and bravely hailed the smugglers, demanding they surrender. But as his boat approached that treacherous entrance of the run, it hit a sandbank. Without even hesitating, Master Allen jumped right into the water to physically pull his boat forward. And at that exact moment, the smugglers opened fire from the shoreline. Allen was fatally shot in the leg and side. He fell back into the boat, and, incredibly, even as he lay dying, he was still urging his men forward.
The fury that followed that was just intense. For 3 solid hours, a pitched battle raged right across the harbor. Our naval and revenue men returned fire as best as we could from 200 meters out, while the smugglers just poured musket fire from the beach, eventually falling back to the Haven House Inn, using that very building as a fortified stronghold. But by the time the smoke finally cleared, it was a totally hollow victory for us. The smugglers had successfully secured their cargo and vanished into the surrounding Dorset countryside. We literally had to wait until 3 of the next morning for the rising tide just to tow their empty ships away.
As you can imagine, the aftermath was brutal. The authorities were embarrassed and absolutely furious about the murder of a Royal Navy master. 3 men were eventually arrested, though 2 got off on a technicality. But in 1786, the Crown decided to make a horrifying example of a smuggler named George Coombs. He was executed in London, and then they transported his body all the way back here to Mudeford. They hung his rotting corpse in chains right outside the Haven Inn, the smuggler's favorite pub, as a grim, visceral warning to anyone even thinking of defying the king's customs again.
But you're probably wondering, what about John Streeter, the mastermind? Well, this just brilliantly illustrates the sheer absurdity of history sometimes. The guy managed to completely escape punishment. He just kept right on running his illicit operations, using a tobacco processing plant as a front. The authorities kept hunting him, of course. In fact, in 1787, the collector of customs at Cowes wrote this letter noting that Streeter had narrowly escaped being captured yet again. Get this, by disguising himself in women's clothes. I mean, he was like a ghost, just slipping right through our fingers every single time.
Now, as your 18th century guide, I really have to clear up a massive myth that sprouted up long after my time. If you visit Mudeford today, you're going to see a famous local landmark called the Black House, right opposite the quay. Local folklore insists that during a siege, we excise officers set fires to smoke the smugglers out, permanently blackening the walls. Sounds incredibly dramatic, doesn't it? Well, historical records show it's entirely false. The building didn't even exist until after 1840, decades after our battle. The lease simply required the builder to paint it in good oil color, specifically black, every 4 years. So yeah, no fire, just a really strict landlord.
But hey, despite the myths, the true echoes of our battles are actually permanently written right onto the landscape. If you look at this 1924 map, you can literally trace the history. See that creek flowing across the marsh on the northern edge of the harbor? It's named Mother Siller's Channel, named directly after Hannah Seller, the smuggler's landlady, supposedly because it gave secretive access to the rear of Streeter's property. And even today, the local Sea Scout headquarters is named Training Ship Orestes in honor of the Royal Navy sloop that fought alongside us in that dark July of 1784.
Today, of course, Mudeford Quay is a vibrant working harbor. But the sacrifice of the revenue service hasn't been entirely forgotten beneath all those stacked fishing pots and holiday cottages. In 2017, the UK Border Force, who are basically our modern successors in the Customs Service, unveiled a memorial bench right on the quay in honor of Master William Allen. It's just a quiet place to sit, look out over the water, and remember the brave man who gave his life pulling a rowboat toward an army of entrenched gunmen.
So, the next time you're enjoying an ice cream on a sunny pier, or maybe watching the kids catch crabs off a quiet stone wall, I really challenge you to look a little closer. This beautiful world of ours is just layered with hidden histories. What dramatic, violent, and fascinating stories might be buried right beneath your feet, just waiting to be uncovered? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I really hope you enjoyed stepping back in time with me as much as I did. See you on the next one.